And the big headline is that after less than 4 hours of deliberations, this 12-member jury today finding Mario Fernandez-Saldana guilty of first-degree murder and solicitation of a capital felony. Ken, this was relatively quick return of a verdict in this case. He is the first of three suspects. We want to go back into the courthouse for one moment as the judge is talking to
He is entitled to a pre-sentence investigation report. I would order that. Is that the request?
He is entitled, yeah.
Right, I'm asking. He can waive it if he wants. All right. I can pass this matter over for sentencing purposes to schedule October 5th. It's just for scheduling. It wouldn't have to occur that week. This case is passed to October 5th, and that's at 9 a.m. for sentencing to be set in courtroom 308. Thank you all very much. Court's adjourned.
And you saw right there Mario Fernandez-Saldana learning that October 5th they're going to schedule the hearing for him to be sentenced at a later date. Ken, initially the death penalty was on the table. That is off the table. The maximum sentence he could face is first-degree murder. But I want to get your reaction. The jury was able to consider lesser charges of second-degree murder or manslaughter. They gave him the stiffest guilt possible in this case. What's your reaction?
Well, that tells excuse me. That tells me that the prosecution made their case, and it was convincing enough to the jury that this person was guilty of all of the things that he was charged with, and they chose, as you just said, they chose the highest degree that they could give him. Now, the fact that the jury came back so fast lets me know that they were very attentive. They paid close attention to everything that was going on. They took copious notes. They did all their due diligence, and then they were given instructions by the judge this morning as to how to deliberate and look over evidence and all of the things that's been presented, and then make their decision from that point on. They all obviously came into, it probably came into agreement on the first vote. You know, when they would go around the table and ask, well, how do you vote, guilty or not guilty? So 4 hours for a case like this, that's pretty quick.
I mean, we heard 7 days of testimony, and I was in the courtroom watching the jurors closely. They did have their notepads out. They were taking a lot, and they asked a couple of questions today that give us a little bit of insight. And one of those questions was regarding Shanna Gardner's trust and how she would be able to be the trustee of her own trust if she was not entangled in any legal things with Jared Bridegan. Shanna Gardner is set to go on trial next month for Jared Bridegan, her ex-husband's murder. This was the first of 3 trials, 3 defendants in this. So now that he's been found guilty, how do you think that impacts her trial?
That's a good question. And so you got to look at the totality of circumstances and the totality of everybody involved. Right. It's going to be held here in Duval County. I believe that a lot of people was following this trial, so it's going to be a challenge to get an impartial jury, in my opinion. It can be done, because there's going to be some people that's not interested in watching this and keeping up with it. So you've got to have an impartial jury, not once, but 2 times again for her trial. So this verdict may, if she is guilty in any kind of way, she's presumed innocent until proven guilty. If she's guilty in any kind of way, it may convince her to try to get a deal, some type of plea deal.
Oh, interesting.
As opposed to going through a trial and being convicted. Then you can throw the dice and take your chance in a trial to see exactly where that would land. But the fact that he was convicted in the highest degree in such a short order after closing arguments says something to her and the other suspect.
Very interesting. This jury never heard from Mario Fernandez-Saldana on the stand, but they did hear from him in his interview with police. And I don't know if we have that soundbite available, but if you all can pull up the soundbite of Mario. It was 13 days after Jared Bridegan was killed, and he was called in and, yes, not taking the stand. Mario willingly went in to Jacksonville Beach Police and he talked about Jared Bridegan. He was not a suspect at that time. I want you to listen to what he said to police less than 2 weeks after Jared Bridegan was killed.
If she could have more timeshare on her end, if it was like 60-40 or whatever, if we could bend it just enough, it'd be great because the kids would be better off.
Right.
You know, and if we could push them into the corner of all the interaction with the kids, we all need to be together.
Yeah.
So they could just suck it. And I don't care if they're suffering because they're uncomfortable.
So that's what he told police. And when I was listening into that, I was surprised that he would be so frank of, you heard his words about a man who had just died. I wonder what role that played in the jury's deliberations.
Well, the investigation in and of itself played a large role. The rollout from the police to the prosecution dissects everything, goes over it, follow up with everything that they've investigated and found. And the fact that he initiated the contact, if you will, with the police and said, hey, I don't have anything to do with it. I want to talk to you about it. He basically kind of implicated himself. You know, he wasn't a suspect at the time, but for him to go in and talk and speak the words that he said threw a red flag to the investigators. Like, okay, this guy's coming in on his own.
Right.
He's talking to us and he's saying certain things. But see, a lot of times they forget Miranda. The Miranda says that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
Right.
And that's what they did.
Yeah.
They went right back to it, and it was used against him.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, the state's case was largely circumstantial. I mean, the defense pointed out there's no DNA linking him to the crime. There is no eyewitness linking him to the crime.
No weapon.
But one of the things that I kept going back to were the 3 checks found in the car, the truck of the man the state and the defense say was the shooter, Henry Tenen, who's also charged in this case. Those 3 check stubs totaling $10,000 that Mario signed, and Henry Tenen was the former tenant of Mario Fernandez, who he evicted. Why was he paying him $10,000? And the defense tried to say, no, he was doing legitimate work. He was doing yard work. He was doing roofing work.
Well, I'll change my profession if I can make $10,000 in a day's time or in a month's time, or whatever. But on a serious note, that was key. That was critical.
Yeah.
You're paying that kind of money, and it doesn't make any rhyme or reason. It made no sense, that amount, the amount of money that he was given to Tenen during that particular time. So it just kept pointing in his direction, even though it's circumstantial.
Right.
Still don't have a weapon.
Right.
Still don't have a witness.
Right.
You don't have any DNA evidence. They convicted this guy on circumstantial evidence. And I've always said, it's not likely a lot of times, but it's not impossible not to convict someone on circumstantial evidence. So all this circumstantial evidence came to fruition today.
Sure did.
It resonated with the jurors.
Yeah, first-degree murder, guilty of that and of solicitation. I want to bring in our legal analyst now, Curtis Fallgatter. You've been watching this trial very closely. This jury heard 7 days of testimony. They had a lot of evidence to consider, and they returned this guilty verdict in less than 4 hours. Your reaction?
A quick jury verdict is typically a government verdict. So that's what happened here, and they sifted through the evidence. And as Ken just pointed out, the judge instructed that direct evidence is no different than circumstantial, just as powerful, and sometimes circumstantial evidence is more powerful than direct. You don't have a gun, so what? They would have thrown it away. So the real killer, I think, for the defense was trying to suggest that there wasn't a motive. He was the only one with a motive, and Tenen had zero motive. Why would he do it? He didn't rob the man. The only reason was a contract killing, and all the dots connected in the mind of the jury, and correctly so.
In the closing statements, the Assistant State Attorney Christina Stifler said that Mario Fernandez is the thread that links Henry Tenen to this crime. And I think that really stuck with the jurors, saying that he was the threat. He was the common, spoke in the wheel was one of the words that she used. Take us through what happens next. We know that a hearing has been scheduled for October 5th to determine when his sentencing hearing is. What is he looking at?
Well, they waived the death penalty, but he's still facing life. So I can't imagine a sentence much different than that. It's premeditated murder. He deserves a life sentence. I would expect that's what he's going to get. There'll be a complex sentencing hearing. They'll do sentencing memorandums. They'll call witnesses, character witnesses, maybe some psychologists. But ultimately, I would reasonably expect that the life sentence would be imposed.
And how do you think, Curtis, I was asking Ken this, is going to impact Shanna Gardner's trial? Shanna Gardner is Mario Fernandez's now estranged wife, who is the ex-wife of Jared Bridegan. Her jury selection is supposed to start on Monday, with her starting her trial the following week. How do you think it's going to impact it?
A couple things could happen. First is a quick verdict. She might rethink the need of having a trial. Maybe it's time to cut her losses and work out something. If she doesn't, then they may want to implement a little different strategy than what we saw in the Fernandez case. For example, he admitted that Tanner was the murderer. Was that the right thing to do? Was that the smart thing? Because that's the key to the case, and it's the same thread you just talked about. If she admits that, she's likely looking at a similar verdict.
Very interesting. Another question that they raised during the trial was that Henry Tennant is believed to be seen on surveillance video walking away from the area where this happened in Jacksonville Beach back on February 16th, 2022, but someone was driving his truck, and no one was able to answer who was driving his truck. Could it have been someone else? We don't know. How do you think that played into all of this?
Well, it's a factor, but the key thing is, again, that thread. You got Tennant, there's no reason in the world he'd be out on that street at that time, at that location, committing a murder, and why would he do that and not steal something from the car, from the person? Only because of him being the thread with the conspiracy to commit the murder, and she clearly has to be a part of it.
Yeah, and for that guilty verdict, the state did not have to prove that Mario was there when the crime happened, only that he was a principal in that. And describe what a principal is. A
principal is when I hire you to go rob a bank. I'm the principal. You may rob the bank, but I'm the one that put you up to it. I got you the ski mask. I got you the gun. I gave you the layout to the bank. I'm just as guilty as a principal as if I had committed the crime.
Ken, you've investigated cases before. What was the critical evidence in this case you think led to that guilty verdict today?
Basically good police work and a great prosecutor. They presented all of the evidence, all of the facts. They laid it out. That prosecutor did an excellent job of just laying it out plainly for the jury to see it. And it was, in my opinion, no doubt that they had all of the ammunition that they needed to convict this guy, basically based on all of the evidence that they presented and all the witnesses that they called. You notice that the defense, I think, only called two witnesses.
Two witnesses, yeah.
Two witnesses. So I think that they kind of understood, okay, we're in a sinking ship right now, and we'll call whoever we can call to try to get what we can to keep this guy alive, and maybe he'll get life. I'm just saying maybe that's how they were thinking, and they just threw up the flag, the white flag.
Curtis, the fact that no weapon was ever found, it's believed to have been a 10-millimeter gun, no weapon was ever found, and this was a largely circumstantial case. Were you surprised that it came back guilty?
I was expecting it. You never know. The defense did a pretty good job, two extraordinarily gifted prosecutors, but the defense did a great job. They pointed out a lot of holes in the case. But normally you don't have to prove motive, and you tell the jury that. But this case was really all about motive. Yeah. The strongest part of the case was the motive. Who else on the planet would have done this horrendous premeditated murder except for someone that had a reason to get rid of him? And they were the only ones on the planet that had the reason. Tennant had none. So the motive ultimately, I think, played a really large role. And again, I think the defense conceding that Tennant was the murderer and he's the tenant of Fernandez, with all the connections there, was a bit of a strategic error. And
he was the tenant who Mario Fernandez-Saldana had evicted and then later paid a total of $10,000 in checks 1 to 2 months after Jared Bridegan was murdered. And for our viewers who haven't been following this closely, the state laid out what appears to be a compelling case with that guilty verdict, that a tire was intentionally placed in the road, a dark road, on the night of February 16th, just seconds before Jared Bridegan had driven to that spot right after he had dropped off his twins that he shared with his ex-wife, Shanna Gardner, Mario Fernandez's estranged wife, and that when he got out of his car to move that tire, that's when he was fatally shot. And his little girl, Bexley, who was just a few years old, sitting strapped in the car seat in the back of the car, and heard that and saw that happen to her father. 4 years later now, the jury today, this afternoon, after deliberating for less than 4 hours, has reached a guilty verdict in this case. Ken, I want to ask you this, because there was someone who was driving the truck, is it possible that there could be future arrest in this case?
Yeah, there's no statute of limitations on this, number one. Number two, the investigation didn't stop just because they've reached a guilty verdict. Now, it's going to continue because there are holes that needs to be filled that they haven't filled yet. As Curtis said, the defense did a good job of poking holes in some of the prosecution's arguments or whatever. But what's amazing to me, Heather and Curtis, is the fact that they were able to redraw and recreate this entire crime scene and get DNA evidence off of a tire.
Yeah.
That's kind of unheard of. They got DNA evidence off of a tire to link Tenon to the part. Now the pieces began to come together. They get Saldana, they get the ex-wife, they put them all together, put the circumstances all together. They come up with the reason why this could have been orchestrated and done. I mean, they knew the exact road that he was going to be traveling down. They knew that the proper placement of the tire was important to make him get out, to move that tire, and then execute him right there. It's just amazing how they put it all back together. But the investigation continues.
That is very, very interesting. One of the things that stood out to me as I was listening in the courtroom to the testimony is that they pointed out Mario Fernandez never told police that someone he knew had a truck like the one the Jacksonville Beach Police Department had put out to the media about a month after Bridegan was killed. It was a unique truck. It was I believe it was a Ford F-150 two-toned that had blue on it, and that's the truck that Henry Tenon had been driving. Why did he not tell police, hey, I know someone who has this truck, I know you're looking for it? You know, the first time he interviewed with police, that description had not been put out, but he talked to police after that, and that he never said that. And to me, that really stood out.
Well, he went to the police on his own to try to excuse himself and get himself out of the investigation, to take their small attention that they had at that time. They didn't have a whole lot of attention on him because he was not a suspect at that particular time. So to take that attention off of him and put it towards Tenon more so than anything. But here's the thing, when you hire somebody to do something like this, there's no honor among thieves, you know. Tenon can say, hey, I'm gonna give you the goods. I'm gonna tell you everything you need to know. You know, I did this, I was paid that, and here are the reasons why, and just call it the day. And these are the people that helped me out, be it Saldana and the ex-wife or whatever. But the fact that they put it, I just keep going back to this, they put it all together and made it into a story. Like, this is the story of Jared Bridegan's life ending, and here's how it happened, here's why it happened, and here's who did it.
They really walked the jury step by step in those closing arguments. On this day this happened, and this links to this. And I think it wasn't until the closing arguments that we saw the whole picture of how all these little pieces, and the prosecutor kept saying, don't look at them isolated. When you put them all together, the big picture is that Fernandez, is the thread that links it all together. I want to play for our audience a couple of statements from the prosecutor and the defense in closing arguments, talking about motive or lack thereof. Let's listen to this.
Henry Tenon didn't have motive or means or opportunity, absent one person. We started this case with the ultimate question: who did? Who had these things? And standing here a week and some days later, the answer should be clear to you and proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt. This defendant, Mario Fernandez, and his wife, Shanna Gardner.
Jared Bridegan was murdered. Henry Tenon murdered Jared Bridegan. Mario Fernandez had no motive. He had no desire.
Curtis, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, no, that's true. And back to the point you made, Heather, by the way, is you know, what's going to happen next? And Ken's point, no honor among thieves. Well, he's been convicted now, Fernandez has. Is it time for him to rethink his strategy? He could become a state's witness. His ex-wife is the one that put him up to this. I know he went along willingly, but she's really as culpable as he is it time for him to turn state's evidence and maybe try to improve his future on what his sentence might be?
Interesting. Now, and they're actually still married. They are estranged, but they are still married. They were separated. So he could potentially testify against Shanna Gardner, try and cut some time on his sentence.
He could. And he could identify the driver, if whoever that was. Maybe it was her, maybe it was him, but there could be a fourth suspect out there that he could cooperate against and get further credit against his sentence.
And you're saying more arrests could potentially be made in this case?
There's no statute of limitations on it, so they can go back 10, 15, 20 years from now.
4 years in the making. Any final thoughts?
I think the prosecution did an excellent job, as well as the defense. You have to give credit where credit is due. I think both sides presented their arguments. The prosecution was a little more convincing because they had facts, they had evidence, and they had everything that they needed to convince that jury that he is the one that's guilty of all those charges that he was charged with.
All right, Ken, Curtis, thank you for your insight. So after less than 4 hours of deliberating, a 12-member jury today finding Mario Fernandez-Saldana guilty of first-degree murder and guilty of solicitation to commit a capital felony. He could face up to life in prison. There is a scheduling hearing in October to determine when he will be sentenced at a later date.